Welcome to Thought Frontier.
Okay, get ready to have your mind blown wide open today because we're going deep on this idea that maybe, just maybe, our whole universe is, get this, a thought. Like a self-generated simulation, but not by computers or anything, by, wait for it, consciousness itself.
Oh, right.
It's way beyond like those simulations you see in video games these days.
Definitely.
This is about like the very fabric of reality, you know?
Yeah.
So to really unpack this whole mind-bending thing, we've got some wild sources lined up. We've got a former minister, right, who ditched the sermons and got deep into quantum physics.
Which, honestly, when you think about it, maybe not that far of a leap, you know?
And then there's this super skeptical blog post we dug up, really picking apart the logic of how the universe could be a thought.
Right, because how does that even work?
And then we'll even dive into a physics paper that lays out this whole theory.
It's a lot, but trust me, it's a wild ride.
So first up, let me introduce you to Fletcher Christian.
Okay.
Now, this guy's journey is fascinating. Went from literally delivering sermons as a minister to like diving deep into the world of quantum physics.
You know, it's like he was asking that big question, what if the divine or like the force behind everything wasn't some, you know, the classic image we all think of?
The old guy in the sky.
Yes, exactly. But like something woven into the universe itself.
Yeah, it's like he traded in his robes for a lab coat, you know?
Yeah.
And instead of looking for God in a book, he starts looking for him in quantum mechanics.
Exactly.
In his article, he even says this, and this is a quote, "What if God was less of a bearded deity and more of an efficient language axiom?" Right. So that whole idea, like maybe the universe is more like a code, like a cosmic code, that really grabbed him.
It's a wild thought.
It is. And this led him to the work of this group called Quantum Gravity Research, QGR for short.
Okay, QGR, got it.
And let me tell you, these are not your typical lab coat-wearing scientists. You know,
Yeah.
These physicists, they're proposing something way more radical than your average scientific theory.
Okay, so what are they saying?
They're saying the universe isn't some grand plan, right? Like set in motion by, you know.
Some higher power.
Exactly. They think it's a self-simulation.
They're self-simulators.
Being written and rewritten constantly by, get this, consciousness itself.
So like our minds are shaping reality.
It's a lot to unpack, right? But what if, just think about it, what if our thoughts, like our actual awareness, are a force, a real force, shaping everything around us?
That's a lot to process.
It really is. So before we get too comfy with that mind-blowing idea, let's bring in a little bit of doubt, shall we?
Okay, yeah. Good idea.
And that's where our next source comes in. This blog called Uncommon Descent. It's archived now, but back in the day, it was all about intelligent design.
Intelligent design, so like the idea that some things in the universe are just too complex to be random.
Right, like something had to design it all.
Okay, got it.
And let's just say they were not on board with this self-simulation thing at all.
I mean, it is a pretty wild concept.
Like, they even called it kooky in their post, which honestly makes me want to believe it more.
Right. A little too dismissive.
Exactly. But their criticism, it actually brings up a really important point. They say, and I'm quoting here, according to classical reasoning, self-simulation wouldn't make sense.
So they're coming at it from a very traditional perspective then.
Exactly. That cause and effect, straight line kind of logic.
But to even begin to wrap our heads around the universe being a simulation, like, we might need to throw that whole classical way of thinking out the window.
Right, like maybe our old ways of thinking just can't handle something this big.
Exactly. We've got to be open to new ideas in physics, radical ones that seem impossible at first glance.
And, reading the comments on that blog post, it's clear this whole thing really gets people fired up.
Oh, I bet.
Some are like, whoa, this is incredible. And others were like, this is pure nonsense.
Which, honestly, is kind of the sign of a good theory, right? It's provocative. It makes you think.
Totally. It's a good reminder that even those out there theories can spark some really important conversations.
Push the boundaries of what we think we know.
Exactly. So speaking of pushing boundaries, our next source, this is the big one, the academic paper by Irwin, Amaral, and Chester. These are the brains behind quantum gravity research, that group we were talking about.
QGR, right? The ones who think the universe is a thought.
Those are the ones. And this paper, well, let me be honest, it's dense.
Dense how?
Like really dense. But luckily, we've got you, our expert, to guide us through it.
Well, I'm not sure about all that, but I'll do my best to be your translator into the quantum abyss, so to speak. But trust me, it's worth it. This paper lays out the entire foundation for how this whole self-simulation thing could even be possible.
That's what we like to hear. So hit us with it. What are the key ideas we got to be on the lookout for in this paper?
All right, so one of the most important is this thing called the principle of efficient language. PEL, they call it.
PL. Okay, I'll follow that.
So imagine, if you will, the universe is like a programmer, right? And this programmer, they're trying to write the most elegant, the most efficient code possible.
Okay, so instead of lines of code, we're talking about the laws of physics, like the actual fabric of the universe.
Exactly. So the PEL, it suggests that the universe is always trying to express the most information, the most meaning, all that complexity with the least amount of code possible.
So it's all about efficiency, like the universe is a master of optimization.
Right. And when you think about how much information is packed into like one thought, your experiences, memories, all of it.
It makes you think about the universe a little differently, doesn't it?
For sure. It's a lot.
It's mind-blowing. To think that our universe, that everything we know, might not just be a random bunch of particles, but like a system driven by some kind of deep efficiency. Like it's striving for meaning.
Right. It really challenges those basic assumptions we have.
Totally. So where does that lead us? What else did these QGR folks propose in their paper?
All right. So this is where things get really, really wild.
Hit me with it.
They call it timeless emergentism.
Timeless emergentism. Okay, you're going to break that one down for me step by step.
All right. So just imagine that the entire simulation, like the whole universe, exists as one massive timeless thought. And time, as we experience it, right, past, present, future, all that, it's an illusion, like a construct within that larger timeless thought.
So you're saying time isn't even real, that it's all happening at once.
It's a lot to process, I know.
It's huge.
But think about it. Maybe our brains are stuck, right? Like stuck in just one frame of a movie, you know?
But the film itself, it exists all at once.
Exactly.
Whoa. Okay. I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this, but it's a lot. But I got to ask, before we get too lost in timeless emergentism, this whole self-simulation idea, it brings up a pretty big question, doesn't it?
What's that?
How can a universe even create itself? Isn't that a paradox? Like, which came first, the universe or the consciousness creating it? It's the chicken and the egg all over again.
Right. It's a question that's been bugging philosophers and theologians forever. But what if, and hear me out, what if the answer is that we've got to ditch the whole linear way of thinking?
Teach linear thinking. Okay, I like where this is going.
This is where this guy, Douglas Hofstadter, comes in with his idea of a strange loop.
A strange loop.
Yeah.
All right, you've got my attention.
Okay, so a strange loop, it's basically a system where cause and effect, it isn't a straight line. It's intertwined. It loops back on itself. Imagine like a system where the output of a process is also the input for that same process.
So instead of cause and effect, it's like cause, effect, round and round.
Exactly. It's a loop, a self-sustaining feedback loop.
Okay, that's pretty out there, but I think I'm starting to get it. But how does this strange loop thing apply to like the whole universe creating itself?
Okay, so if we let go of this idea that time is a straight line, right, then the universe can be its own cause and its own effect at the same time.
So it doesn't need some external thing to get it going. It's just constantly creating and recreating itself in this loop.
You got it. It's a self-sustaining system. Its own existence is what allows it to exist.
Okay, that is a serious mind bender. It's like totally flips the script. And you know what it makes me think of?
What's that?
That skeptical blog, Uncommon Dissent. Remember how their big argument against the whole universe as a simulation thing was that it didn't make sense?
Right, because they were stuck in that classical way of thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're right, in a way. If we keep thinking about cause and effect like a straight line, then yeah, a self-creating universe seems impossible.
But if we can wrap our heads around these new models, embrace the strangeness, the loops,
then suddenly the impossible becomes possible.
right. It's like we're upgrading our whole understanding of how the universe works.
It's a lot to take in, but it's also like incredibly exciting. Thinking that our universe could be this self-sustaining, self-creating thing, always evolving, always changing, inside this giant loop of cause and effect. It's a lot, but it's also pretty incredible.
It really makes you question everything, you know?
Everything. And you know what's even crazier? The implications of all this go way beyond just the universe itself. This touches on like one of the biggest mysteries there is.
Go on.
Consciousness.
Now you're talking, remember how earlier we were talking about that whole observer effect thing?
You mean how just observing something, like even looking at a tiny photon, can change how it behaves?
Exactly. So this paper, it takes that idea and runs with it. It says our observations, they aren't just passively influencing things, they're actively part of the creation process.
Hold on. So you're saying we're not just watching the simulation, we're actually helping to write the code.
In a way, yeah. Our thoughts, our choices, all of it could be shaping the universe on a fundamental level. It's like that physicist Amit Goswami said, it's a participatory universe.
Okay, that is mind-blowing. So we're not just these tiny, insignificant beings in a predetermined world. We're active participants.
Yeah.
We're shaping things.
It's a pretty powerful shift in perspective, and it links back to what Fletcher Christian was talking about, that idea of us becoming divine agents. It's not about waiting around for miracles to happen. It's about realizing that we might have the power to create them ourselves with our own thoughts and actions.
Okay, but that's a lot of responsibility to handle, right?
Yeah.
It makes you really stop and think, if our thoughts really have that much power, how would that change how we live? Like, every little thing takes on a whole new meaning.
Now, that's a question worth thinking about. And it leads to even bigger questions about, free will, destiny, all of that inside a universe that's simulating itself.
And those, my friend, are questions we're going to have to dive into after a quick break. All right, so we were really trying to get our heads around this idea that we might be active participants in a self-simulated universe.
Right, like our thoughts could be shaping reality.
Yeah, exactly. But if that's true, then this whole free will thing starts to feel a lot more, I don't know, heavy.
Definitely make you think.
It does. It does. And this is something the QGR paper actually dives into a bit.
Oh, really?
They talk about two different types of thought.
Okay. 2 types of thought. I'm intrigued.
They call them emergent physical thought, and then there's emergent consciousness thought.
Okay, so like 2 flavors of thought. What's the difference?
So think of it like this. Emergent physical thought, or EP, it's like the base code of the universe.
Your base code, okay.
Yeah, like all those fundamental laws of physics, the constants, everything that makes reality, well, reality.
The foundation that everything else is built on.
Exactly. Now, emergent consciousness thought, that's EC, that's where things get interesting.
All right, so if EP is the base code, what's EC?
EC is us. It's our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams, everything that makes us, well, us.
But our consciousness is like a higher level program running on the universe's operating system.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. And here's where it gets really mind-blowing, according to QGR. There might be no limit to how complex this EC, this consciousness, can get.
So the universe is like this endless well of information, just constantly generating more and more consciousness.
That's the idea. It's both beautiful and kind of terrifying at the same time.
It's a lot to process, but it does make you wonder, like, is there a limit? Well, what happens if we hit some sort of peak consciousness?
Okay, those are some seriously big questions, and honestly, I don't know if I'm ready to handle that kind of cosmic information overload just yet.
Yeah, I hear you.
But it does make you think about those possibilities.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about, like, just how much potential there might be within our own minds.
It's definitely a humbling thought.
It is. It is. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. This whole self-simulated universe thing, this idea that our thoughts are shaping reality, what does that mean for free will? Like, are we really in control, or are we just, playing out some pre-written script?
The classic free will versus determinism debate, a question that's been around for ages.
Right. Are we just puppets, or do we actually have a choice in what we do?
What if it's not an either-or situation? What if it's both?
Okay, I like where you're going with this. Both? How?
Think about it like this. Imagine the universe is this giant tapestry, right? The threads, those are the laws of physics, the flow of cause and effect, the basic rules of the universe.
Okay, so the tapestry is like the predetermined structure of reality.
Exactly. Now, we're not just threads in this tapestry.
We're not.
No. We're more like the patterns woven into the tapestry. We have the freedom to choose the colors, the textures, the designs that make us unique.
So we have some creative freedom within the bigger picture.
Exactly. We're bound by the rules of the universe, sure, but within those boundaries, we've got a lot of room to make choices, to act, to create, and all those choices, they influence the tapestry.
It's like we're all co-creating this reality, working within a set of rules, but also contributing our own little piece to the bigger picture.
Exactly. And you know what? Maybe those little choices we make, they have a ripple effect. They influence things way beyond what we can even imagine.
Like that butterfly effect, but on a cosmic scale.
Right. Even the smallest decisions could have massive consequences.
So even though we might just be tiny threads in the grand scheme of things, we still have the power to create something amazing.
And let's not forget something terrifying, too.
Oh, right. Because if our thoughts are shaping reality, then we're responsible for the bad stuff too, not just the good.
Exactly. It's a lot of responsibility, this whole consciousness thing.
No kidding. It really makes you appreciate the power of our minds and how important it is to be mindful of what we put out there.
For sure. Because if we really are living in this self-simulated universe, then consciousness is a powerful force. It can shape things for better or for worse.
It's a humbling and a terrifying thought at the same time.
Absolutely. And it brings us right back to that question Fletcher Christian was asking.
About what it means to be divine.
Exactly. If we really do have the power to shape reality with our thoughts, then maybe we're not that different from those gods and goddesses we read about in mythology.
It's a powerful thought, that's for sure. But let's shift gears for a second. Back to those skeptical bloggers over at Uncommon Descent. Remember how they were saying this whole self-simulation thing just didn't make sense?
Yeah, they were pretty adamant about that.
And, they were looking at it from that classic linear way of thinking. But as we've been talking about, this whole self-simulation idea, it needs a completely different approach.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. You need a different shape to make it work.
Perfect analogy. And that's what makes all of this so exciting. It forces us to stretch our minds, to question everything we thought we knew.
It's a good reminder that sometimes those really out there ideas, they're the ones that help us see the world in a whole new light.
Totally. And who knows, maybe by embracing these radical ideas, we'll make even bigger discoveries down the line.
The possibilities are endless, so ready for part 3?
Let's do it. I'm ready to dive back into the deep end. All right, so we're back, and I gotta say, my head is still spinning from all this.
It's a lot, right? This whole self-simulated universe, consciousness creating everything, it's like we took a trip down the rabbit hole.
Seriously. But that's what makes exploring these kind of far-out theories so much fun. It makes you question everything.
It really does. And the thing is, this idea, this whole self-simulated universe driven by consciousness, it's not just some, abstract idea.
Right, it actually means something.
It changes how we see ourselves, Our place in everything, even our everyday choices, take on a whole new meaning.
Totally. If our thoughts are actually shaping reality, then every little thing matters, even more than we thought.
It's both empowering and kind of terrifying at the same time.
No kidding. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, we got to circle back to something we talked about earlier.
What's that?
Free will. If we're really living in this self-simulated universe, a universe that's basically a thought, does that mean we don't have a choice in anything? That everything's already decided?
Yeah, it's the age-old question, isn't it? Free will versus determinism. And it's one that philosophers have been going back and forth on forever.
So are we really just making choices, or are we just playing our parts in some big cosmic play?
What if it's not so black and white? What if it's not one or the other? What if it's both?
Both? Huh. How does that work?
Imagine it like this. Think of the universe as this grand, cosmic dance floor, right?
Okay, cosmic dance floor. I like it.
So the music, the rhythm, the beat, that's all set. That's the underlying structure of the universe, the laws of physics, all that.
So that part's predetermined. But what about us? Where do we fit in on this dance floor?
We're the dancers. We get to choose our own steps, our own style, how we move to that music. We have freedom within the structure.
So it's like there's a plan, but we have some wiggle room within it.
Exactly. It's a collaboration between the universe and our own choices. We're bound by the law of physics, sure, but we still have the freedom to create, to express ourselves.
So it's not about being completely in control or having zero control. It's about finding that balance.
That's the idea. It's a dance. And who knows, maybe our choices, the steps we take, they influence the music a little bit too.
It's like a feedback loop, everything influencing everything else.
It is. And it all comes back to this idea that we explored today, that maybe, just maybe, our universe is a thought, a self-generated simulation.
It's a mind-blowing concept, that's for sure. And honestly, I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what it all means.
We've just started to explore the tip of the iceberg. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? There's always more to discover.
Exactly. So if you've enjoyed this deep dive into the self-simulated universe, remember, it's up to all of us to keep asking these questions, keep searching for answers, keep exploring those big mind-bending ideas.
Because who knows what we might find out there in the vast, mysterious expanse of the cosmos.
But on that note, that wraps up our deep dive for today. Until next time, keep those minds curious.